So, what are some practical ways that we can use groups and companies and that we can further automate the populating of groups? Well, for one thing, what we could do is we could use our database more creatively. Later on, we'll talk about using our customized user fields, but that might be a perfect way to be able to populate a group. For example, in the case of the group that had to do with golf, first we used that lookup by example, or we used to actually look up by keyword to find anything that had to do with golf. But from now on, when we add context to our database and we want to identify them as being somebody that has an interest in golf, what we might want to do is use one of our user fields. If I click on the user fields tab and say I identified user 1, the user 1 field as being user interests. So therefore my user interests of golf would call that to be in the group. In other words, we could set the criteria so that the group would automatically be maintained by that interest. In other words, first we identify user 1 as being interests, and we'll talk about how we identify the user fields a little bit later on. But then what we would do is, if I clicked on the groups button in the navigation bar, and then let's say I just right click on golf people, come down to group membership, add remove contacts, and then edit the criteria. Well, once I've identified user 1 as a field that has to do with interests, then I can select user 1, and would user 1 then have a value that was equal to golf? If it does have a value that's equal to golf, then it would be added into my database. So that's one way that we can creatively use our database to automatically populate and keep groups populated. Another thing that we can do creatively is we can use companies. I'm going to click on cancel and come out of here, and what I want to do is I want to take a look at companies and notice that in between CH Holding and Circle Photography, notice that there's no Cadbury company. But we do have some contacts that have to do with Cadbury. Well, if we wanted to associate those contacts with a company, then what we would need to do is create the company first. In other words, if we were to take a look at Cadbury right now, let's say I did a lookup. And I'll do last name, and we'll put in Cadbury. And you notice we come up with William Cadbury, who is the owner of the Cadbury Company. Now, the Cadbury Company right now is not linked to any group or any company. How do I know that? Because the Cadbury Company is not a hyperlink. It's not a blue hyperlink here. Now, if I wanted to link it, what I could do is click on the box with the ellipsis. These three dots is called an ellipsis. And now it's looking for Cadbury, but as we said, Cadbury is not going to be found there. So let's cancel here, go to companies, and then what we're going to do is we're going to add in Cadbury. So I'm going to say I'm going to put in a new company, and then just put in the company Cadbury. Now, the great thing about these companies is that if I decide to change, once I link this, if I decide to change the address of the company, then it would change anybody who's associated with it. And so now that I've added Cadbury, now I've got that listed over here on the list of companies in the hierarchy of companies. Now, if I wanted to add in the owner of Cadbury, go back to contacts, and then let's click back on his contact address or his contact name, or we're going to click on company name rather, and what we want to do then is link the contact to the company. In other words, we want to create a link whereby anybody associated with Cadbury can easily be called up by company. So we're going to click on OK. Now notice that Cadbury is in fact a hyperlink, which could bring up more than one contact. In fact, it's showing 2 of 2. Let's click on Cadbury now. Double click on it to bring it into company view, and we see in this case we just have the one contact, William Cadbury. But we could associate multiple contacts with a company, and the great thing about it is once they're associated, then any changes that I make to the company records would be made to all of the contacts that are linked. So as you can see, that could save some time. And again, we could go over 10 different ways to use companies and groups and how they intersect. But the main thing is just to know that they exist so that you can kind of experiment with them on your own. And you're going to find the best ways to use groups and companies for your own database. Or maybe you'll find that it's easier to just do lookups by example. One thing's for sure, you're going to want to get some information out of your database and get that into hard copy. And so we're going to have a whole chapter next on getting it in writing. That's next.